Well, hello, Viva El Birdos. We are here with another edition of our VEB podcast, and we've got some of the writers with us today. We've got Gabe down there, still rocking the Miles Nicholas mustache, looking real tight, though. I'm liking it, as always. Heather Scooter Simon is with us, and I saw a dog peek its head in here just a second ago. So the full menagerie is probably going to be making its appearance at times.
Yes.
And former Birdo, long time writer on the site and at the Hardball Times and at gatewayredbirds.com and at Cardinals Talk over on the Post Dispatch. We've got John LaRue, or JL, or I think JL 24.
21,
yeah, and
like
then RC21 is how I first know you. That's for me, you'll always be RC21, which I think lived until Roger Clemens
embarrassing
jerk. So anyway, John, just for a little story, I've told this before. John's in history and my history, we've never met each other, by the way. But we're going all the way back to Cards Talk, and I remember one of the first discussions we had. This will tell you how much I've learned over the years from John. We had this debate when the Cardinals signed Juan Encarnacion. Yeah, I don't even know when that was. I honestly could not tell you. Some
classic
other
Juan Encarnacion debate.
Yes.
Juan Encarnacion career ago.
Yes, and so I thought excellent points about his batting contact ability with that like 275 career batting average or whatever it is. And, that decent power that should translate really well to Busch Stadium. None of this makes any sense if you know me now. And John came back at me. It's like, well, his walk rate. And I'm like, who cares about his walk rate? And that's how I got into analytics, or even just basic baseball stats, was John saying.
2006 analytics.
Yeah. You might consider on base percentage. I'm like, on nothing percentage, man. So that's how it went back then. John was always way cooler than I was. So
huge lore drop in the podcast this time. I love it. I love getting the lore on on the writers.
That was Card Stock, and it was a cesspool of death, and we have moved on to Twitter, where John is now. Former Birdo, as I said, wrote for several years on the side, but John is an expert in all things, and so we wanted to bring him on a little bit and chat about the things that he wanted to talk about, the things that he's still following even though he's no longer writing. And we'll just jump right in with what I think is kind of maybe the most important topic for this coming year, because this one player could probably make, or well, not necessarily break, but definitely make the difference in the Cardinals offense being at the top of the league and just near the top of the league. And that, of course, is Lars Nootbaar. So, John, let's talk Lars.
Yeah, let's talk Lars. I thought you were going to bring up Wilkin Rodriguez, maybe. Like,
we could. He's going to make or break. I'm fully prepared for the Wilkin Rodriguez discussion. If you'd like to go there,
we'll get there. The amongst in the pantheon of Cardinals with strange spelled names, I think we'll like put aside Wilkin Rodriguez for a minute and dig into Lars a little bit. But yeah, I mean, kind of like we were doing in the pre-show, we were talking about the pre-show, like Lars is just a really interesting guy, because you see, Gabe, as you pointed out, it was such a limited minor league performance, and then he arrives in the majors, nobody knows what to expect. He's kind of getting the bat knocked out of his hand, and then all of a sudden he goes to Driveline and he's coming back with, he's greatly improved his exit velocity and max exit velo and everything, and he's suddenly a force at the plate. And he always had he's a tremendous tool set otherwise, right? I mean, he's a pretty good base runner. He's got a great arm. He's great plate discipline and everything. It's just, he's a great player. It just, that power component was missing. And he didn't really have the bat to ball component quite there. But if the power carries, it makes it a totally different lineup, as we saw really for, half of last year.
Right. And just to kind of provide a little context, I know some of you, I'm going to try to put this information on the video. It'll definitely be in the Viva El Birdos article that I attached to it. But for those of you that are listening and don't have any audio at all, you're the smart ones, by the way. But average exit velocity for large news bar. Wow, Nootbaar. These would be percentiles. 90th percentile average exit velocity, 89th percentile max exit velocity, 80% hard hit percentage, walk rate 98%, barrel percentage 85%. I mean, it's just all red. Arm strength 94%. It just, whatever it happens to be, Nootbaar can do it. And I wanted to point out too, it's not like he had 2 months of offensive surge and that's where all these numbers come from. It was about a month or so of terrible baseball too. Horrible stats that got him sent down that feeds into this too. It's not like Baseball Savant is ignoring his struggles early in the season. It's all there anyway. It just, even in his slump, this is who he was.
Should we possibly explain to people who might not know what like 80th percentile means for those stats?
Sure, go ahead.
No, I'm okay. Well, no, I can. No.
You walked into that one, Gabe.
No, isn't it just basically that he is the 80th percentile of all hitters at that particular stat?
Yeah.
So exit velocity and all that. Anyway, I was just worried that somebody would be listening and be like, 80th percentile, what's going on? Like I would have asked maybe.
Yeah. Top 20% basically, would be the other way to kind of say it. So as I've always just kind of said on Baseball Savant, red is good, blue is bad. And a lot of red on his page, just especially in the stats you would look at. The hard contact stats are just solid red.
And not to derail the conversation, but that's pretty much why some people might be worried about Dylan Carlson, right? His page is kind of blue.
Yeah, a lot of blue. And again, not to derail the Lars discussion, but I think it is kind of worth putting Carlson and Nootbaar kind of together. One, because they're likely to be somewhat competing with each other for playing time. But then also, you're talking about young prospects that are coming up. Dylan was a highly touted prospect for his all-around game. Nootbaar had the walk rate, but we didn't know if the power would ever show up. And so, it's important to recognize that even though I've defended Carlson from his injuries, his wrist injury, and he also had a quad or hamstring injury this season that affected him at the plate as well. But even besides that, some of those numbers just simply aren't there. He's much more of a good all-around contact hitter than Nootbaar is, whereas Nootbaar has made himself into a dynamic power hitter.
The interesting thing about the comparison to me is that Nootbaar is, if he's for real, basically what we were hoping for Carlson. Would you agree with that? Because I didn't expect him to play center field either, Carlson. So Nootbaar, I don't know if Nootbaar can play center field, but they're going to try, I think, because they were talking about Carlson not necessarily being penciled in as a starting center fielder, and not sure if O'Neill's going to be the guy. They got some options, but a lot of questionable defense, if you will, maybe, no matter who's at center field for right now.
I think all three of them can probably handle it. It's a type they have, really, right? I mean, guys like O'Neill and Carlson and Nootbaar, and even in the infield with Arenado, like they love their well-rounded guys. And that kind of translates in the outfield to like you can kind of hang out in center field a little bit, maybe not every day, but so I'm curious to see how they play that out for sure. But to defend Dylan Carlson a little bit, I think the injury is definitely, well, I don't know, definitely, but like I would suspect the injuries played more of a role in last year than we probably even know. He's never really been that guy to light up the Savant stuff, but I also, the one thing I always think of with the Baseball Savant stuff and the lot of red, a lot of blue is like context is always important too. I think it was a couple of years ago we were talking about Carlson where like he didn't have a lot of barrels, didn't have a lot of hard hit balls, but what he did have like left the yard. And it like there's something to be said for like maximizing your good contact. It's like the blast versus barrel, like not all barrels are the same. Blast versus hard hit ball, very different. And I feel like Carlson's probably one of those guys who can maximize his hard hit rate, but I don't know that he's going to be drive line Newt necessarily. So
Yeah, I kind of looked at that a little bit a couple of weeks ago when I was kind of evaluating the impact of his injuries, and you see that in like 90th percentile exit velocity stats. Like I'll be honest, and John, you can talk about this and whatever, but I'm becoming increasingly less of a fan of average exit velocity because there's guys like Dylan Carlson that almost intentionally make weak contact. You know, it just and all of that averages in. Carlson is unlike Newt to some degree, and like unlike Arenado, who also has a relatively low average exit velocity for the type of hitter that he is. You would expect him to be peaking like Goldschmidt, but Arenado's pretty low. You know, Carlson every now and then just wants to drive the ball to left field for a weak hit as a right or as a left-handed hitter. He'll just kind of take what is there. And that, I mean, that used to be a very common thing that we would see among hitters. We didn't see Willie McGee driving the ball out of the park. We didn't expect him to do that. And Willie and Carlson's not maybe the best comparison, but not all hitters are made to be these superpower, you know, go for it type guys. And I think that's maybe what makes Nootbaar so exciting is that he looked like he was going to be a contact walk guy coming up who could maybe have average defense in a corner spot. And instead, here we've got someone who has, you know, barrel and blast stats that kind of look a little bit like, not saying that this is the case, look more like Aaron Judge than, you know, even Lars or even Dylan Carlson or some of those other guys.
I think the other thing too with the like you were talking about average exit velocity, say there's a lot of weird nuance with stuff like that where like flares for instance, if you hit a lot of flares, there's a lot of production on flares. A lot, and it's all like singles and doubles.
John Jay.
John Jay, exactly. Right. And it's wildly unreliable. Like it's whereas, you know, like the higher exit velo stuff is reliable. You know, it's repeatable. Whereas flares are not at all repeatable unless you take them in on the whole, like as a team, where, you know, the more contact you make, the more those you can collect, the more likely you are to amass those weird singles and doubles that probably make up all, like you look at all the things that make up the variance and the stuff that we know and the stuff that we don't know. And I've never tested it, but I always suspected that there was a huge portion of the variance made up in like what percentage of flares did you have? We only have like 6 years of data to even test something like that out, but I bet there's a lot of variance where like Dexter Fowler can be a perfectly serviceable outfielder or what Dexter Fowler was at the end, right? Like it's just flares.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point. I mean, there's such, you know, there have been a lot of baseball players who have had really, really good careers that would not have had, you know, baseball savant, you know, percentiles in the red. And some of the guys that we've watched and loved over the years. Now, and it's not that it's not like baseball savant is out there trying to create one kind of baseball player and that's the only kind of baseball player you can be. That's the things that they're measuring. But I think since a lot of these metrics are fairly new and baseball has become somewhat three outcomes, that it would be really nice to have some of these stats and metrics on players that we used to watch. Like what was Keith Hernandez? You know,
Juan Encarnacion might have been a StatCast darling to go.
He might have been, yeah, right.
I mean, circle, like he was that kind of guy. He made a lot of loud contact. He also didn't do a lot of other things, especially well. But yeah, you know, you're right. Willie McGee exactly is like what were what's the OAA on Willie McGee in center field? Would love to see that.
Yeah,
like, we'll never get it, but still.
I would say one reason to be encouraged specifically by Nootbaar's Savant page, because you're right, exit velocity on its own, you need context, but the context I would use is that he had a relatively low batting average on balls in play, and he hit the ball very hard, and they're removing the shift, and he hit it. I think he was hurt a lot by the shift, if I remember correctly. He hit a lot of balls in where the second baseman or third baseman would be standing. So that would be my reason is that he hits the ball very hard and he had a low BABIP. So you would expect it to rise naturally. Throw in the shift, he's going to get, I think he'll get a decent amount of extra hits just without it being any different.
Just to kind of confirm that, I don't think that these are stable stats. At least I haven't seen them be stable in the little bit of research that I've looked. And Nootbaar is a good example. They're flipped one year to the other, but he also doesn't have a whole lot of plate appearances. But last year, with the shift, his WOBA was 312, which is not very good. No shift was 378, which is exceptional. So, yeah, if you can't shift him, he's going to get some of those ground balls that affected his BABIP and his batting average. Not that we care that much about that. But some of those are going to sneak through and they're going to raise those stats. I should say too, Dylan Carlson, similar things, maybe not quite to the same rate as Nootbaar, because Nootbaar does hit the ball hard, and so a lot of those ground balls are going to get through. But Carlson, maybe O'Neill a little bit on the other side are going to see a bit of a bump from second baseman after covering more than just half of a position on the defensive side. So
the other thing that makes me curious about, like you mentioned, the lower the BABIP for Nootbaar, it kind of makes me wonder about like his home runs per fly ball. It's like if he hit more home runs than you'd expect on those fly balls, then that's fewer balls in play. And so suddenly like fewer hits that are, if they land 5 feet shorter or whatever, they're doubles and his BABIP goes up. I don't know that we're probably talking like 5 maybe, or who even knows. I think you'd almost have to look at a spray chart to see like how many were like wall scrapers, how many, but something like that. 3 to 5 balls in play makes a difference.
I see no wall scrapers on his home run chart.
Right.
On his spray chart. And his home run to fly ball rate with 16.5 is
normal, I think.
Yeah. It's repeatable. I'll put it that way. It's repeatable. Yeah. Could be better, actually.
I gotta say, we have on record, JP Hill says Lars Nootbaar is going to be Aaron Judge. Everyone remember that. It's
I'm writing that down.
Write that down. Yeah, just like my just as valid as my Cardinals will trade for Mike Trout prediction earlier this winter. You got to provide content in these things, otherwise what's the point? So.
Right. You got something to shock and awe.
The proper portmanteau would be Nootbaar and Judge, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
2 A's and R, we're good to go.
Yeah. Heather, as I know analytics like this isn't necessarily your cup of tea, but if you were going to, which one would you look at and you say, you know what, I think I would rather have, would you rather have a guy like Newt or would you rather have Dylan Carlson? Obviously both of them playing at their peak, and keep in mind we have both. So it's not like it's a
I don't
debate,
have to choose.
But, being a fan as you are, what would you want to see more?
I think kind of like what everyone's touched on so far is when you look at the baseball savant, all the red. I want to see red. That's usually when I do the previews and stuff. One of the first places I look is baseball savant and see or savant, I don't know, whichever you say it. And I like to look and see if there's anything that either a pitcher or a hitter is exceptional in, and then like look further into that and see if that's something interesting or not. And so I do think it is kind of interesting that he, like you mentioned, was hitting kind of poorly and was still excelling in all these stats. It reminds me actually earlier in the season, I wrote about Paul Goldschmidt and how all his sort of peripheral stats looked really good. And I even put like a Goldschmidt watch because I was like, he's gonna be fine. He'll break out here in a little bit. And then he did, and then I stopped paying attention to it. But yeah, so that is more what I would look for, is just because it's more interesting to find people that are like really good at these weird little things.
Well, especially with pitchers, right? Like that's kind of a fun way to look at pitchers too, because you get like, what's your carrying tool? What is it? Why are you around? Like, to go back to like Wilking Rodriguez, and I'd love to. I can't wait to see what he starts doing on his Savant page, right? Because he's exactly the kind of guy where probably going to be something really strange that's really red, and it's going to be fun.
Right.
Yeah. So just a little context here. Looking at WRC plus, in the first half, Nootbaar, I can't remember when he went down and when he came up, but I think this is it's going to break it down pretty well. First half, an 88 WRC plus, with a 246 BABIP. So this is interesting. Second half, 140 WRC plus. That's very good. With a 248 BABIP. So BABIP just ain't his thing, it looks like. Do we care about that? Like, I mean, it's hard for me to say that I really care about contact ability, but you know, if I was going to pick at something with him, that would be what it is. But he also has got good walk rate and good K rate, so it's not like it's a, you know.
Well, it all depends on how for real the low, because he has barely been in the major leagues, so you can't necessarily take what he's done so far at face value. So it's more of like, is this like deserved or is this unlucky? And if it's unlucky, then he'll still be, if he keeps playing the way he's playing, an above average player. If it's unlucky, then he could really take the next step and make an all-star game easy. If, you know, the fans or coaches decide to give him that. But
I think it kind of goes back to something I've seen you, like you pointed out a lot with Bader, right? Where like the floor is higher because he has these other tools. Like he's still going to get his walks, right? Mm-hmm. He's still, especially in right field, is a much better defensive outfielder. Not Bader quality, nobody's Bader quality, but there's a higher floor because he's a well-rounded player. So even if he slumps at the plate, there's other stuff he's going to do that'll provide value. And yeah, I mean, if the power is real, then, you know, you are talking about like a 4-win guy or, you know, 4.5-win guy. And if it's not, then he's, you know, Randall Grichuk or whatever. But
this is more anecdotal, but it does seem like Lars Nootbaar had a lot of really pivotal or important home runs or moments too. Like I'm thinking about the comparison to Carlson again, and I can't really remember a Carlson moment, not off the top of my head, but I do specifically know of a Nootbaar home run. It was like late in the game. I can't remember the specifics, but I know that one exists. And so maybe it's anecdotal, but that's always kind of fun too. It's like he has more positive memories associated with him.
Was it the one that was the left field that was barely over the wall again?
I think so. Yeah, it was like real late in the game, and it was tied or they took the lead, but it was important.
We were getting like no hit by some okay pitcher, if not bad pitcher. I don't remember.
I don't know why I can't remember specifically.
But yeah,
I'm pulling up the information here. It's a 6th inning against the Braves, if that's the one you're talking about, because you can just click.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's the pitcher?
Do what?
Who's the pitcher?
Jake Odorizzi.
Oh.
And it was the ball. This is an Albert Pujols a chart here. It was high and outside, and Nootbaar just muscled a 92 mile per hour 4-seam fastball, basically right over the Chick-fil-A sign, just right there. Right there at the left field foul pole. Distance for that home run 355 feet. And just snuck it out. It was a 0-0 ball game. Yeah,
that was the start where Odorizzi only threw fastballs, and he didn't have a very good fastball the rest of the year for some reason. But that game we couldn't do anything. For context, by the way, if you're wondering when Nootbaar got called down, it says April 25th, they called them down to Memphis. Then they called them back up on May 23rd, called them back down on June 10th, called them back up on June 20th, called them back down on July 14th, called them up the next day. I don't know what happened in the day, but he got called up and down a few times in the first half, which could have contributed.
I was not aware of that for sure. I knew there was some extended time. I didn't realize there were multiple trips to the Memphis show for sure.
I hadn't either until you laid it all out like that.
Mm-hmm. I guess that speaks volumes about how far he came along and how we thought about him. Like you wouldn't even notice if he was there for like the first the first 2 months, and now it's like, wait, no, he was gone for a big part of that.
Right.
One thing I noticed is just because I just got done studying Carlson, one of the critiques of Carlson defensively has been that he's got a strong arm and he's got decent speed, but he doesn't get very good jumps, relatively speaking. So I was just looking at Lars here, and this is just his percentile ranking, so it's just the top of the page. I could dig into the, to the OIA and stuff like that, but so this would be, I would think, mostly corner outfield. It's almost identical to Carlson. So sprint speed 74, almost exactly the same. Arm strength 94. Both Carlson and Nootbaar extremely strong arms. Outfield jump 51. So again, Nootbaar like Carlson. It's basically they're basically clones of each other. So if you think to yourself, well, could Nootbaar play center? Well, he's exactly the same as Carlson, and Carlson can kind of play center. So really, either of them out there, would be an option. Which probably is why Mozeliak didn't necessarily give Carlson that vote of 100% confidence on starting center fielder because of Nootbaar and Jordan.
So much of their roster, though, it's like it's all mix and match, and it's not in a bad way either. It's a great thing. You can have Carlson in center field. You can have Yepes in. I mean, I love Juan Yepes. I don't know that I love him anywhere in the outfield. But you could do that for 4 or 5 innings if you have to, or you can. I mean, there's so many. Donovan can play anywhere. Edmund, if you want to, can play anywhere. I mean, there's so much mix and match that you can play. I kind of wish they would do that more with the pitching staff, but I wonder if that's actually coming. If you look at the way they're kind of building out, not to jump topics or whatever, but it feels like that may be coming with the pitching staff as well. But
yeah, I'm not sure how much options they really had last year, especially for the strikeout options. I also do wonder how much Mike Maddox's input might have gone into that. We don't know. We do know that Marmol was pretty. One of the things I was talking about going into the season is that they created platoon opportunities. Would they use it? Because Schilt really didn't take advantage of those platoon opportunities. And to be honest, Mozeliak didn't really give them to him either. They talked about doing platoons and then they didn't create any, and then Schilt didn't use them even if he could have. So kind of a, double bad there. But Ollie, on the other hand, though, platoons all over the place. So seems like he's all set to maybe take advantage of that.
Yeah. And Gorman too. I mean, they have multiple options everywhere. You just basically, it's Goldie and Arenado and even Wilson Contreras, like their big signing of the offseason. Yeah, he's a catcher, and they want him to play catcher as much as possible, but they also did it knowing that a year or two down the line, it's no big deal if you have to DH him, or even this year, it's no big deal if you need to DH him. It's no big deal if you need to move him off of there for like the Cubs did and put him in the outfield or at first base or whatever for, a few games here and there. So, well,
you got to get Andrew Kisner's bat in there. I mean,
yeah, that's. Yeah, I'm waiting for the
sorry, kids. I had to just, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there.
There will come a day where like 35-year-old Andrew Kisner will have been a backup and just around, and he'll be like that guy. And, he's like, there's every generation has that guy that he's a catcher. He knows what he's doing. Like, we're going to hire him he's our manager now. Like,
he's our manager.
Oh man, I don't know that I want to go there.
I've seen Andrew Kisner's future.
Yeah, right. Oh well, let's jump over to the rotation since you mentioned the pitching staff, and let's just go ahead and have a little story time with John LaRue. We learned about a new stat today that John put us onto, and it's extremely interesting, and it's very relevant to the Cardinals pitching staff. So just go ahead and see or explain what it is that you found for us.
Sure. Yeah, and it's the folks at Pitchers List. Unfortunately, the author's name is escaping me at the moment, but the Pitchers List people, I think,
Jordan White. It's Jordan White.
Yes. And basically, it's a it's these acronyms kill me. It's basically they took another look at the called strike, swinging strike rate, and weighted pitches differently, right? It's a lot easier to strike a guy out when they're more likely to be swinging, or they're more likely to take a pitch early in the count, once a guy gets to 2 strikes, they get more defensive. They just want to put the bat on the ball, a little bit harder to get a strike there. So basically it's like weighted earned strikes is what they call it.
Yeah. Like a
and
small W, for those of you that aren't whatever, it's a small W and then a big ES, weighted earned strikes. Think of it like
the way you would spell
WOBA or
West,
something like that. Yeah.
but backwards for the capitalization.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I was just kind of curious to see I think there's a sequel coming because they haven't talked about how it affects relievers. But they did zero in on starting pitchers, and starting pitchers over a certain amount of pitches thrown. And I thought it was interesting to see how it affected various Cardinals compared to like their called strike and swinging strike rate. How do they appear in this new thing, wES or whatever, weighted earned strikes? And then one of the biggest fallers, so to speak, was Adam Wainwright. And you sort of, I don't know for sure, I don't want to put words in the author's mouth, but you start to think through like what happened. And it's like basically Waino steals strikes when it's easier to do so, which is not a bad thing for the record. I mean, it means he wants to, it's actually the most obvious thing in the world, right? We all know this because we watched Adam Wainwright for years, but he gets his strikes early in the count when he can, when guys are not on guard. And later in the count, he may have to deal with contact, but at least he's getting ahead of hitters, putting hitters in pitcher counts and things like that. Montgomery and Michaelis were kind of the same thing, but not nearly to the extreme as Adam Wainwright, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's, again, nothing ground shatter or earth shattering, but definitely verifies what we kind of all know about Adam Wainwright.
Mm-hmm. So just and I don't know, I'll definitely link to it in the article, but Montgomery, is he the highest? I haven't found Mikolas yet. Let me just do a search.
I think it was 48.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Montgomery's definitely the highest. Yeah. We won't get to we're gonna have to get to poor Dakota Hudson. Yeah. Well, you guys can already imagine where Dakota Hudson ranks in weighted earned strikes. I don't think he threw a single strike last year. But
in fairness, it's about as well as he did in the called swinging strike.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Auto win if he's not the last.
Right. He's not last, but you can see last from his house. So Jordan Montgomery, I guess that's probably pitches or strikes thrown. Yep, pitches thrown. Okay. So Montgomery is the highest rated Cardinal starter at 53rd, which is not bad, honestly, considering that he's not really a strikeout pitcher. That's kind of better than I thought he would rank at 27.96% WES. I'm not really sure.
If it helps for context, he's 53rd out of 161.
161, yeah. So top
third,
top
33rd percentile, one might say.
Oh, there you go. There we go. And full circle. Number 1, by the way, is Shane McClanahan. So that's interesting. Aaron Nola's just as high as you'd expect him to be. Spencer Strider, Corbin Burns, Otani, Aaron Ashby, Carlos Rodon. Some of these guys the Cardinals should have been after for the last couple of years. Brandon Woodford, Shane Bieber, Max Scherzer. That's a hard one for me to say today. Kershaw's up there still. I mean, that's pretty amazing, actually. You know, considering what was happened to Wainwright's career, Kershaw still 13th in the league in WES. That's impressive. So 53rd for Montgomery, and then it drops like a rock. Mikolas. Any guesses on where Mikolas is before I tell you guys?
100.
161 pitchers.
100 is my guess.
100. 113 for Mikolas. So not quite bottom. Nope, bottom third. Yeah, that would be bottom third.
He reminds me very much of Wainwright, so that does not surprise me with the way he approaches batters.
Exactly. Yeah, very similar. Some guys that are around these names that you might know or be interested in. Around Mikolas, names that I know, Chris Archer, Noah Syndergaard is a little bit above him, which not surprising considering Syndergaard's career, but considering what he was last year, I would say Mikolas was significantly better pitcher, but yet here they are in the same things. The other Zach Thompson, who I think was traded this week.
The Pirates, Zach Thompson, right?
Do what?
Or not
The Pirates, yeah, because our Zach Thompson wouldn't qualify as a starter for here. Quintana comes in at 123. So,
Yep.
And then Wainwright we said was 90. And then I'm guessing Flaherty wouldn't be on here.
They didn't get the minimum. I was pretty bummed about that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those like pet stats where like I don't know how to reverse engineer it or whatever. What I think is funny too. It sounds like you maybe did the same thing where like I grabbed him and ranked him and everything, and it's like I love thinking of like how organizations have their style, right, or their thing. We talk about the Cardinals and they have to like they love their well-rounded guys. Well, they also love their pitch to contact guys who steal, So yeah, Quintana is right there. That creep can roll. He's right behind Michaelis, and then you've got like not too far behind them is like Michael Waka, and there was another one I just saw that was like Austin Gomber actually.
Yeah,
it's like all these guys who were once Cardinals who are in that meaty lower middle kind of thing. Yeah.
The interesting thing about Quintana being where he is a lot of fans are mad that we didn't sign him, but I'm just thinking he's kind of he's kind of the same thing. Like if I was going to get a starting pitcher, because we already got 5 clear ones and Dakota Hudson and then Liberatore. I think I'm missing a name. Palante. And if we're going to get another starter, well, I would want somebody who is a step above all those guys. And Quintana is kind of the same thing, which is why I never had a problem with us not signing him. But I feel like everybody complains about that.
By the way, Andre Palante is on the list. Any guesses on where he is?
140.
Oh, Gabe, you should take this show on the road, man. You got this. You got this one nailed. 145. So
I missed him. I didn't know he was on there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected him to be, but yeah, Palante is 145, just below Madison Bumgarner.
I don't like the names you're comparing these pitchers to. Please stop.
Yeah, right. And as I said,
Marco Gonzalez, if we want to go that route.
If you scroll just a little down, you don't want to scroll too far down, otherwise it gets really scary. But yeah, just below Palante is Marco, Johnny Cueto's there, Brad Keller, Anibal Sanchez, and if you're looking at the list, John's laughing. You can see who's just below Anibal Sanchez is Dakota Hudson. So that's not very encouraging that Andre Palante and Dakota Hudson are on the same screen at the same time in this scat. John,
in fairness to Andre Palante, though, like he can be lots of things, right? Like he doesn't. And this is why what I'm saying about the rotation, like, yeah, they think like they have 5 guys or whatever, but just use these guys a couple of times through the order and move on. It's how you ended up with Palante in the first place, and you got. It's a great way to introduce like McGreevy if he makes it this year, or the other kid whose name totally escapes me, like Graceffa, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And eventually Tink Hence, we're a ways off from Tink Hence, but just give those guys a couple of times through the order. It's not 1985. It's not 2005. Like just, and yeah, I wish there was more swing and miss in all this stuff, but you can when you do it that way, you can make those changes and make those adjustments and make those improvements incrementally rather than like the one big swing that they're never going to make with guys like Scherzer and Verlander when they become free agents.
Right. He's not going to show up on this list, but I think the same thing about Liberatore. I watched a lot of Liberatore starts this year, and I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like if Marmol had just taken Liberatore out after the 4th inning, second time through, we would all be really happy with his season. I mean, he would have had some moments just as you expected of a rookies, but a lot of his blow-ups came, second, third time through, 4th, 5th inning. And you could see the velocity just tick, 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 tick down, which is bad. I'm not saying this is good. That's what you don't want to see. But when you start seeing that, you're like, well, then why am I leaving this guy in? He's not Wainwright. He can't command his pitches. He can't throw strikes on the corners. He can't convince the umpires that this is a strike when it's a ball, So yeah, use him like Palante, give him 4 innings and get him out of there.
I don't know if he's listening, but Lawbird, one of our commenters, is always making the argument for Liberatore. He's got 3 great pitches. He just needs to locate his fastball. It doesn't matter that it's below average right now, because whatever the 3 things that go into a pitch, release point that all looks solid. For some reason, they're just crushing the ball. So I'm definitely not giving up on Liberatore at all. And
some of that is BABIP stuff. Like, I mean, major league hitters do not hit 500 against, a 95 mile per hour fastball. Now they might hit 500 against a 90 mile per hour fastball, which again goes to his ability to maintain his release point and his velocity throughout a game. But even with a bad fastball, he's gonna get a lot of outs because his other stuff is I wouldn't say dominant, but it's got a lot going for it. And tunneling's good, but tunneling's great if you're Clayton Kershaw. If you're only asking 3 or 4 innings out of Matthew Liberatore at the back end of the rotation, or in a Zach Thompson
piggyback role, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he's fine, perfectly fine,
and
almost an asset.
Their entire pitching staff is not entire, but Waino, of course, and Michaelis too. But the rest, it's like, look, I can eat fresh ice cream, or I can let it melt. You tell me what you want,
yeah,
or I just go get another dish. This is a terrible analogy, by the way.
You keep going. You're
gonna keep talking about ice cream.
Yeah.
But
I'm getting it.
If it's, there's no reason for them to push these guys past what they're meant to go beyond. And it's kind of why, I have this weird fascination. It'll never happen, and I understand why it won't. I think it'd be hilarious if they signed Michael Wacha and just run with a weird 6-man rotation, or Waino, Michaelis, and then the other 4 are this weird hybrid of 3 spots. It'll never happen. Never happen. But it's a fun idea. It's kind of like the same that I'd love to see him sign Trey Mancini, partially because I live on the East Coast and I saw him with the Orioles. He's fun, but also it's you could have your Corey Dickerson and take a step up, but you don't really need it.
This is kind of like what we were talking about with the weird stats that it's I don't know how good this player is going to be, but it's going to be fun. It's if they're going to try to run out some of these kind of mediocre, let's do something fun. Let's make it a little weird.
St. Louis would lose their minds over Trey Mancini. He is absolutely the kind of guy that the city would just embrace. So
I love it.
So I've never done this because I'm lazy and it's going to take a lot of work. But John, I think you might have, and I think Gabe, you've at least looked into it, and we've talked about it before. Can the Cardinals, with a 13-man limit on the roster now, and also limiting the ups and downs, I think it's 5 options so you can come back and forth. So you can't just go to Packy Naughton every 2 weeks. So you've got to, there's got to be some roster control. Can you run your starters for 4 innings? And your relievers for 2 or 3 innings and survive for a season with your innings totals? Or are you going to run into trouble somewhere? Does it make sense? Does my question make sense?
Yeah. Hey, Gabe, what do you think? Or Heather, what do you think?
Well, when you say 4 innings and then 2 to 3 innings, you're missing.
Yeah, let's say the second time through. I mean, it might not be 4 innings, but maybe you push them a little to the third. But you're not running. There's no expectation that Steven Matz. Let's use Matz. Mm-hmm. There's no expectation that Matz is going to go out there for the 3rd time through, especially considering his injury history, his innings totals, and things like that. Like, your plan is to let Matz get 6, or not 6 innings, but. And not 6 plate appearances, but basically 2 times through, and then you're going to get him out of there, whether that's the 3rd inning or the 6th inning. Maybe you take him a little past the 3rd, but the idea is once 4th, 5th, 6th inning rolls around, unless it's Jack Flaherty 2019 again, that guy's coming out, and then someone like Palante or Thompson, and you're not just going to give him a matchup. You're not going to give him 5 batters. You're going to give him 2 or 3 innings.
Oh, I see. 2 or 3 times through the order, or. Yeah. Or 2 times, or 1,
maybe 1 time.
Yeah, like maybe 2 times through the order for your starter, and maybe 2 innings for your long relief guy, quote unquote long relief guy, because you could get to. I mean, you're going to get to the, and then probably 2 innings for your back end guy too, whether that would be, Gallegos or Helsley or, depending on whoever, even Stratton in certain situations in a loss, for example. You could use some of those guys more than you're using them right now. Hicks would be a good guy. You could throw him for a couple innings.
I feel like
Are you going to run out of innings, or is this not going to work, or would it?
I feel like you could do it in theory, but it's almost like the bullpens aren't built to do that. And so you'd have to structure it in a way with the right, because there are like in the individual pitchers aren't necessarily prepped to go multiple innings, multiple days, however many days in a row. So I guess maybe the answer to the question is no, then. I don't know. Because I think the innings are there, but the order in which the innings get accumulated might be the tricky part. Especially if you have like extra innings or someone pitches really bad and they have to come out early kind of thing.
I think you would need more than 5 guys who would throw 4 innings. You wouldn't necessarily cycle through them every 6 days, but maybe you'd have like every 3rd day or something. You'd have the 6th or 7th guy, maybe even 7 guys, throw 4 innings themselves. So almost a couple games you'd have just the starters pitch basically, and you would need another 2 or 3 relievers so you could depend on for 2 innings on a semi-regular basis. You wouldn't expect it every time, but maybe then, and then only like 3 guys would be 1 inning guys. You'd need most of the bullpen to be able to pitch more than 1 inning if called upon. It's a tall ask.
But I mean, think about who they have. Almost everyone out there, maybe not should, but at the way they're constructed now, almost everyone out there can. I mean, you want Thompson throwing more than 1 inning. Otherwise, we don't want to just go ahead and decide that Zach Thompson is a 1 inning left-handed reliever. We shouldn't have done that with Cabrera. I mean, I realize that Cabrera struggled last year, so keep that in mind. But he was a starter. Andre Palante was a starter. Zach Thompson's a starter. Matthew Liberatore's a starter. Go down the line. Ryan Helsley was a starter.
Yeah.
And Gallegos, I mean, Gallegos wasn't. Well, he probably was at one point, but a little different. But Gallegos has also already shown that he can go into a 2nd inning, and it's not Brett Cecil. Well, a lot of things aren't Brett Cecil, but
I think eventually you get to like, I think you would have to have like your protected bucket, right? Like Helsley is your 1 inning guy or less even, right? Unfortunately, he was less the last time we saw him pitch, but that's a whole other thing. Helsley and Gallegos, and like those are your guys. And then where it gets tricky is how much you can rely on that meaty middle, right? Like all the guys you were just rattling off, like Palante and Hicks and Hicks, gosh, who knows what Hicks is going to be this year? That's an interesting one. But but Palante and Hicks and Thompson and Cabrera, actually, like all these sort of swingmen used to be starters, now relievers.
Stratton too, really.
Play up, right? Like
I think Chris Stratton qualifies for your chain because he started as a starter in the major leagues.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't necessarily know that you want to, give him multiple innings, but you can. I mean, someone's got to throw those innings too. You're going to lose at least 60 games this season, and not that you're only going to use Stratton in losses, but I mean, if you're losing, let them throw.
Without being snarky, that is kind of the like. As we were rattling off those names, we all did the same calculus. Yeah, that guy, if it's like not close, sure, of course. Like, no, not a close game. Or you get a lead, yeah, that's who I want. But there's definitely a few of those that can there's shock absorbers, right? Like let them eat up the innings where you're getting blown out. Like why bother with using those guys some other time?
What I will say is that strategy that you proposed is probably like this year would be like about as ideal as possible because you got 5 starters who are almost the same, or at least projected the same. And you've got a few guys who are on the outside looking in who you kind of want to see if they could start. So you kind of ease them in and try to get them about 100 innings, maybe 80 innings. So I could definitely like, you could really maximize it this year because then you could get a better look at what do we need for the next year's rotation, And the only way to do that really is to make sure some of the, like a Thompson or Palante actually gets the innings to prove themselves or fall on their face so we could go a different route.
Yeah.
There's also like this is a fun thought experiment, but the reality is these are humans, they're egos, right? Like
Right.
no kid's gonna want to come up and like we're not gonna let you face anybody a third time through. We don't trust you to face this, who knows, the third time. That really sucks. What does that do for it doesn't do anything for positive vibes, if nothing else, but
And I think that actually would be even worse for the veterans who've been
yes.
5 or 6 years, which is our entire staff.
Yep.
So it might be a tough sell impossible sell to Wainwright, I'm sure.
And Michael is too. And even
Yeah.
a guy like Flaherty, I mean, I think is earned the right as long as he's healthy to gobble up as many innings as he can. But
Right.
Dakota Hudson, not so much.
Not so much.
And Steven
Although,
Matz,
I mean, in limiting doses, like I agree. I mean, I don't want Hudson throwing 5 or 6 innings a time, but I mean, in certain situations in certain ballparks, I mean, Dakota Hudson has been a sort of average-ish pitcher. I mean, yeah, the innings have to come from somewhere, and you can do worse than Dakota Hudson, despite what we all want to think.
you can't eat steak every meal.
You can.
Right.
Well, you can.
Sometimes
You
you gotta
can.
stretch that budget.
You can also eat goose occasionally. Am I right? Did you smoke a goose for Christmas? Did I see the pictures correct?
Duck, but yeah.
Oh, it
and
was duck.
It was
Okay.
duck.
All right.
And it was it ended up being like New Year's because weather didn't cooperate on Christmas. But yeah, smoked the duck. Did I stuffed it? It's like orange and maple glaze, and I totally absorbed the like middle-aged white guy cliche. Like I'm like grill all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty much your new content. Like you're still a content creator, but now you create images of the food that you're making on Twitter.
Dog photos, grilling, and like occasionally snarky things about baseball. That's about it. Yep.
Great. That's a great brand.
It is.
Yeah.
Everybody likes those things, right?
Everyone,
mean,
yeah,
like,
those are like
I'm
three of
vegetarian
everyone's favorite
friendly.
things.
Sometimes sometimes I smoke like squash and corn and stuff like that. So vegetarian friendly and everything.
Yeah.
So when I posted on the site a couple days ago that we were having you back, and I asked if anyone had any questions. Now, keep in mind, Viva El Birdos, I did not in any way prepare John for this, and I'm assuming that he did not scroll down through the comments on whatever random article I had about it was Roland and Arenado, a Hall of Fame article, and find this. And so I'm just going to do a little quick hit, John, asking you a few of these questions and just give me your honest, immediate answers. So Lose Rain Hat wants to know when you're returning from exile to write about the Cardinals again.
Admittedly, there may be a couple of times this year. There were a few times in the past year where I was like, oh, that would actually make a good article. And then like maybe one of the others will take care of it.
Yeah.
And more often than not, you did. So, but like the Lars thing, when you said I was going to be on, I thought, hey, we need to talk about Lars, right? Yep. So yeah, there might be a few times this year I'll have to harass folks about that and make sure it's okay for me to come back.
Sure.
We don't have a site here. You can do whatever you want.
That's right.
We have no leader. So
we can't pay you at all. but we can, we can get
we have
you
no
up there.
way to make that happen.
Yeah.
But we'll figure it.
No worries.
We won't talk about the site. We won't talk about the site manager.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Oh man. Okay. So and then I do of course talk about the site manager situation. Didn't mean to, but I did because I just had to get it off my chest a little bit. And then let's see. The Duke wants to know, does the R need to be capitalized, or do you just feel more important than other people?
It does need to be capitalized, but it's more about French appropriately using the French.
Yes.
So it's the street. So
yeah. So are you related to Jason LaRue, or is it just a coincidence?
I'm not related to the Jason LaRue, but I am related to a Jason LaRue. My 15-year-old nephew who plays hockey is named Jason LaRue, but I'm not actually related to the Fu Manchu former catcher for the Cardinals.
Okay.
Unless it's like way off in the distance.
You might be. You never know.
They say it probably.
Yeah, you might need to do that chromosome test thing and get that done. Let's see here. Teddy Rugby asked several questions about Newt. I think we covered his questions. And then he asked this one. This one won't be maybe as fast as we like, but is there any word on possible changes in approach with the new pitching leadership? Have you paid any attention to those changes?
Slightly. Actually, everything I'm going to tell you, I actually learned. I did a little Twitter chat with Kyle from Birds on the Plaque. Mostly just because I think it's interesting. Like, I feel like the Cardinals' approach to pitching the last 2 years has been kind of interesting, not necessarily encouraging, because I mean, think about everything we talked about, where it's like it's just like 12 guys who all look the same, and a few of them throw really hard and get the same results. But Kyle's answer, I thought, was really interesting. It seems like they seem to be focusing on guys who have like one carrying pitch and hoping they can teach them more, build them out. And it seems like kind of a newer thing. And as far as like swapping out Mike Maddox for, I think guy's name escapes me actually. This is why I was like, here's my list of things.
Dusty Blake.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
and it sounds like he's responsible for a lot of that change in approach. So it's almost like, yeah, Maddox is gone. They've got Dusty Blake, but it sounds like they've kind of been doing Dusty Blake stuff for years anyway. So for better or worse, we'll see. But
good. Well, John, what are you cooking next? What's on the grill tonight or soon?
I'm doing lobster on Saturday. My amazing wife got me some lobster for Christmas, so it's from this like company out of Maine. So it's been sitting in the freezer waiting to go on the grill. And then Sunday is going to be some kind of experiment, either pulled pork or I've only done ribs once, and I might try ribs again. So pretty excited to give that a shot.
Yeah. Good. I've got some tips on ribs if you're ever looking for them. I won't give them to you here because this is a baseball podcast. But hook me up. I'll tell you what I've done right and wrong and wrong and wrong. So
it seems like it's an easy thing to do wrong for sure.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's pretty straightforward. So all right, anything else from you guys?
I'm looking at your notes before that you sent us.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about revisiting a trade where we took a beating from a few years ago?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
So, the funny thing is, I mentioned that, and then like earlier, like right before then, I see people talking about the Ozuna thing, and it's like, okay, that was the one that like you got to punt. You're done. Like it was terrible. Move on.
Move on.
But so many of those other trades, and I'm as guilty as anybody, like in that little window where they were like, they couldn't buy a win in a trade. And you look at them in retrospect, it's like, okay, people were angry about Luke Voigt. Giovanni Gallegos has actually been a better, more productive player by WAR
than
Luke Voigt. And it's kind of more impressive because he's a relief pitcher and not a first baseman DH type. It's type as if there's something else. Hold on. I actually had the notes. Or Gabe, please, if you all want to run with
I got one example. The Marco Tyler Neal trade sure looked like a loss the first few years.
Yes.
And it's probably just an even trade at this point, unless O'Neill decides to be an MVP level for the next 2 years, which he can go ahead and do. But that one, and then what was the other one? Oh, well, Rosarina and Libertor, which is to be determined, I think.
Goldie, right? Like even Goldie was kind of suspect for a year there, where it was touch and go. You're like, oh no, what did they do? And I think it's safe to say they won that trade now. It's like no matter what happens from here on out, no matter what Carson Kelly does, Luke Weaver is available for them to sign if they want him back. So at this point, it's like whatever Goldie does versus whatever Carson Kelly does.
The first year Goldie had I don't know if it was his worst season, but it was either that or his second worst season.
Yeah.
And Carson Kelly had what I still think is his best season, probably.
I guess so.
Got hurt, but he did have like a half a season's worth of pretty good starts. So it looked like they had their catcher of the future and number 4 starter. And Goldsmith we just signed to an extension that didn't look that great at the time. And it didn't look that good after the first year for sure.
Yep. But it's turned out amazing.
Yeah.
And then they were taking a beating over guys like Piscotty and Grichuk, and Piscotty's kind of out of baseball now, I think, or no, he signed with the Reds in a minor league with the Reds.
Yeah.
Grichuk's still Griching it up. And whatever. I mean, they didn't get a lot for him, but it's not the disaster that it seemed to be. Even Mercado, people were really angry about. They've got him back.
We got him back. Yeah.
I know you said within a few years, but this is my opportunity to talk about Dan Heron.
I hated
Let's
that
do
trade.
that. Let's talk Dan Heron. Absolutely.
I want to talk about Dan Heron. It was 2004, and
The year was
the year
2004.
was 2004, and I was a young 11-year-old.
We were first on Avatar the First.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was there, but yeah.
I was watching. No, yeah. I just remember, even as an 11-year-old, I was like, why would they do that? And I think that was for Kiko Calero
Calero.
and Dan Heron
Yeah.
for Derek Barton and Mark Mulder. Mark Mulder being the key piece of that. And I remember my uncle like trying to appease me. He's like, Mark Mulder, left-handed, he's been real good. And then I'm like, no. Dan Heron wore the cool socks, and I wanted him to stay on the team because much like now, these are the attributes I look for in my players, are what kind of socks they have. And then Mark Mulder got hurt right away. I felt immediately vindicated and also sad. So
I gotta need a sock breakdown of stirrups versus high socks versus the like pajama pants.
yeah, stirrups all the way.
Or like the 90s socks, like the sanitary socks.
To give you an idea of where my mind was at when I was 10, I was most bummed about losing Kiko Calero because
That was also devastating, though.
He had a fun name.
His name was Kiko. Yeah, I was just going to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
how many times do you get to say Kiko?
Yeah.
Not many, not anymore.
Yeah.
Until you get a dog.
Yeah.
Like I did.
It is
Tito
a good dog
Landrum. I
name.
loved Tito Landrum when I was a kid. Now I have a dog named Tito, not Landrum, but he's named Tito. Everybody thinks it's a vodka
there's
thing.
the connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody thinks it's a vodka thing, and it really kind of bums me out because I like drinking a lot,
Tito's.
but not vodka.
I'm gonna name my next dog Ray Langford.
That's awesome. Ray is a great dog name.
Yeah.
Ray.
I love giving dogs like regular people name because there's nothing funnier than like yelling for your dog and be like, Kevin.
Exactly.
One of my good friends has a huge like pit lab mix, and his name is Todd. And so you just got the name of Todd. Todd, where are you, Todd? Oh, great stuff.
I'm sure guests are like waiting for a child to come running around the corner. Like, nope, this is my dog.
That's
my
Todd.
neighbor.
I love that.
Oh, good stuff. Well, hey guys, we've passed our hour as always here on the podcast. But I just want to say thanks to John LaRue for coming on and joining us, and he's a lot of fun, and we miss you over the side, especially on Fridays when like Gabe's got to like make something up to fill this
Time for a retrospective. What were things like in 1994?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But it's good to have you on, and we'll have you on a couple times. Maybe it's podcasts are a lot easier than writing articles, as I like to say, because I can't even hardly come up with an idea in an hour, and we can just be done in an hour. So,
Yeah.
but coming up soon, we'll see what we do next. I'll talk to the guys over at the place and try to get Gordon Graceffo on sometime before spring training. That's going to be happening. And maybe a couple others on the list. I would love, by the way, to have Connor Thomas back, because we talked all about his cutter with Connor Thomas, and then he went off to the Arizona Fall League, and everyone was talking about his cutter. So anyway, and if you missed it, our last one was with Alec Burleson, who is without question my breakout candidate for 2023. So other than that, the rest of the writers will be around. We'll have some fun. We'll get some articles out. We'll do some more analysis, and should be good. Spring training is only about a month away, and broadcasts are only 6 weeks away. And you, listener, you might be the next play-by-play broadcaster. Because at this point, who knows who that's going to be? It won't be me, as you can tell. Lars Nootbaar, and things that I can't seem to speak the English language well at times. It will not be me, but it might be you. So, well, for Gabe and for Heather and for John, good to see you guys, and thanks for having us and listening to us. And we'll talk to you again soon. Have a wonderful week.